In this show, Robin and Arjuna try to figure out who the hell they are.
Tune back in after an hour when they haven't figured it out.
From Outface Productions, this is Listening Glass.
So, Robin, what kind of person are you?
Are you trying to put me in a box again? I just feel like you're always trying to trap me.
I'm just trying to get you under the incisive grasp
like here
of my classifications.
I'm already in your room with the door locked. What else do you want?
You're already capturing my voice. Now you want my soul? So
wait, ask the question again. What was
all right. So if I were to ask you, Robin, what kind of person are you? Mm-hmm. How would you choose to answer that question?
Reluctantly.
Okay, so you're a reluctant kind of person.
Only in that context.
Right.
Yes.
You are a resistant to being classified kind of a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I am too. And I think it's what made the choice of topic for today particularly interesting to me. Let's just get the cat out of the bag. We are talking about personality testing. And it's something that's kind of been...
Did you just hear the collective sigh?
I know, right? Oh, God. Another hour of this. But it's really been up a lot lately. I feel like there's been this kind of explosion in like personal development and professional development circles. It's not like this has never happened before. I think there have been like various booms and busts in personality testing like there have been everywhere else. But I have definitely noticed... It's like now everyone knows what their Myers-Briggs is.
You know
right?
what I'd be more interested in? Not to like undersell our topic here, because stay tuned. But
yeah, you know what would make a better podcast, man?
A better topic. I would be more interested in personality profiling my cat than I would be
there you go.
myself. But that,
there you go.
Not that I'm not interested in myself. I'm highly infatuated, of course. But
but that would just be too much of an ethical transgression, right?
To personality profile my cat?
Yeah, because at least you consent to doing it, right? Whereas
I love putting cats in boxes, okay?
But cats love putting themselves in boxes too.
Exactly. They want it.
You're like, is this a box-loving cat or a non-box-loving cat? Mm-hmm. All right. Test over. Test complete. So in preparation for this show, Robin and I did a couple of personality tests, which we will get to in a little while. Why don't we talk about our initial impressions of personality testing?
Oh, God. You want to start there?
Yeah. Just because I think, I think
we've already let that cat out of the bag, actually.
I suppose so. Well, let me talk about it for a little while. So
okay.
I am definitely, I think overall, like an anti-authoritarian kind of a personality. I feel defiant. I don't like to be classified. I think the thing about the personality test, which I don't like, is I don't like the idea that people are going to draw conclusions about me based on a thing that I do that I don't agree with, right? It's like I want some manner of control over like how I'm perceived, or if I am going to be assessed, I want to feel confident that the assessment is going to match my estimation of who and how I am, right? And so I've been really skeptical about personality tests because I have just felt like they weren't going to do that. And spoiler alert, but by and large, my experience taking them has borne that out to some degree. I feel like they're only capturing parts of the equation, or I feel like a lot of personality tests just aren't really subtle enough.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. I definitely agree with you. Maybe I'll wait to air my opinion on these exactly. But basically, I feel similarly is how I'll put that currently.
Right. Yeah. So, okay, let's just do like a little bit of groundwork here before we dive into the specifics. So I was, reading the Wikipedia article like you do in the 21st century before you...
On the Myers-Briggs?
On personality testing.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So the obligatory podcast Wikipedia article reading.
Yep.
And this Wikipedia definition struck me and I really liked it. So the definition is: a personality test is a method of assessing human personality constructs.
Whoa.
So right there, even in that definition, we have this kind of, it almost feels like an indictment, right? Or it's just the acknowledgement that we're making it all up.
Personality, ladies and gentlemen, is a myth.
Ooh, hot take. Explain a little bit.
I don't have anything to say.
Yeah. No,
I mean, I thought of that when I was in the shower when I was thinking about this, just to purely inflame people.
Nice.
But also, I was thinking about it along those lines.
Yeah.
Right. When we hear the term construct, my mind jumps to, okay, just how vacuous is this?
Right.
Right. Or just how manufactured is this?
Yeah. How baseless is it?
Right.
Yeah.
And I hope I get more insight into it over the course of our conversation, because for me, I'm still a little bit undecided about the concept of personality itself.
Sure.
Right. And how do we think of it? And what are we actually measuring with it, right? In different contexts too, which I think is like one of the bold-faced words for me is context.
Context, yeah.
Right? Because there's so many different contexts. I mean, personality, first of all, is a social trait. Do we have personality when we're sitting in a room by ourselves? That's maybe my first question.
Oh, when we're asleep, right?
Or, or when we're dreaming or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think it's an innately social idea. And so it has to do with how you interact with and think about and respond to other people, right?
Yeah.
And so in that way, when we talk about personality, we're basically talking about whether or not somebody is easy to get along with, or are they combative, are they pleasant, or are they kind of rough? It's like that kind of stuff. It has to do more with a dynamic than it does maybe with who somebody actually is.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That dynamic depends on what the basis of the relationship is, as well as just kind of like how two people might click or not click, right?
Well, that's it, right? Because you'll get two people talking about someone else, and one person will say, oh, that person's super friendly. I had a great conversation with them last Tuesday. We talked about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And then the other person will say, man, they've always been really cold to me. You know, I thought they were like stuck up and whatever. And so
this just happened to me today.
Oh, okay, right? Yeah.
Not that exact same like comparison, but I was talking to someone and hearing some like like how they felt about another person who used to be a big part of my life, and I was like, oh, it's really interesting that like they're behaving that way, or at least that you're perceiving them to behave that way.
Yeah, it's a different take, right? So I think you're right. I mean, I think what you're highlighting here is the subjective nature of human relationships, and the fact that so much of what is perceived to be personality is kind of these stories that we tell about each other, right? Okay. And these stories that we tell ourselves. So for me, that's one of the first flaws of personality testing, is that often you can do it in basically one of two ways, where someone takes an assessment themselves, right? Or when someone else or someone else's are assessing someone's behavior.
Right.
Both of these have their flaws, because as we know, a lot of times there are things about ourselves that we don't know. There are also things that only we know about ourselves that nobody else knows about ourselves. And
there are also things we think we know about ourselves, but we're actually wrong about.
Exactly. So there's the known knowns and there's the unknown knowns, and then the unknown unknown. No, anyway. But it's got some Donald Rumsfeld up in here. But even when you start thinking about this, it starts to highlight the difficulty, right? The difficulty of how would I design a test that really captures somebody, right? And what am I even trying to capture? Is it their fundamental essence? Is it just who they are at a party? Is it just who they are at work?
It's funny because we first start learning and thinking about this stuff in high school when we take psychology class, or in college or whenever it is. At first, I'm like, science is cool. Science can figure this out, and we can do these assessments and figure out kind of who people are, right? And then I feel like I'm at this age now where I see how delusional people are in general, possibly including myself, like probably, right?
Oh yeah, like absolutely.
Robin, all, you're delusional. Like, I don't have any delusions about my own delusions. How about that? Like, I have enough doubt in my own self-perception. Like, I don't trust anyone else's self-perception either. And sometimes when people are like really sure, when people are most sure of things, I'm like, my bullshit meter goes highest.
Yeah. I think certainty is a symptom of narrow-mindedness. So when I was reading about this, I came upon something which is called the lexical hypothesis. Okay. This is pretty cool. So it's defined by two postulates. The first states that those personality characteristics that are important to a group of people will eventually become part of that group's language. Basically, what it's saying is that you take a group of people, over time, they will figure out what personality traits, what behaviors, what subjective experiences of each other matter to them within the context of their interaction, and that those will become a part of their shared language. Okay. The second follows from the first, and it states that more important personality characteristics are more likely to be encoded into language as a single word. Okay. So what they're saying is that people will distill these personality concepts into a word. So that could be like kind, friendly, rude, stinky. So I resist going too far down the language rabbit hole because I feel like there's been so much discussion, I would say, in the past 10 years about how language shapes reality. And it's not that I disagree with that, but I think sometimes people go a bit far with it. So they start talking about how like language creates culture and language creates the ways that we interact with each other, and language creates social norms. And I think people maybe get a little bit too chicken and the egg-y with it. Like I think, in my opinion, is that language ultimately still is more a reflection of a culture than a creator of a culture, right? And I would say that the lexical hypothesis somewhat supports that notion.
I guess I just want to unwrap that a little bit, where culture is something that everyone who exists on the planet right now has both inherited and also maybe helped shape a little bit.
Sure.
But all of us are less than 100 years old or so. And so all of us had to learn a significant part of culture through language.
That's true.
And so language is the vehicle of culture, but at the same time, the language that we adopted and learned was an outgrowth of previous culture, more or less directly, right? And so that's my take on it, right? There's a feedback between them.
There is, yeah. And I mean, language is absolutely essential to culture, right? It's just that I feel like sometimes people take it a little bit too far, or like there's this idea that you like create reality with your language. And I feel like your language often reflects your reality.
I find I was more fond of those ideas when I was younger. Right? Where you get these ideas where it's like, well, you know, this is all just determined by culture, all of our values and everything we're doing and what's important.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, I can just create my own personal culture.
Exactly. I can just change my language and I can just change my culture.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's profound.
I recognized when I was learning about this stuff, the key concept for me was the idea of internalization. And that culture isn't a movie on Netflix that you can choose to watch or not to watch.
Yeah.
Right? It's millions of phenomena that you're exposed to every day. And you can choose to filter out some of it. We do have some control, but not nearly as much as I used to think I wanted or thought I could have. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We end up more subject to our culture and maybe more subject to our biology, more subject to our upbringings than we at first thought, perhaps. So that's the lexical hypothesis, just covering the importance of language in all of this. One of the earliest people who we remember now who was talking about personality was Hippocrates. And he came up with these 4 types of temperaments that he outlined. They were called sanguine, phlegmatic, or phlegmatic, however you pronounce that word, choleric, and melancholic.
Oh wow! Okay.
And so these were kind of medical classifications that he extrapolated out as being personality traits as well.
This was Aristotle? Wait,
no, this was Hippocrates.
They're all the same.
Yeah, right. I know. Dead white man. So just like a brief overview, the sanguine type is.
Let me guess.
Okay.
Sanguine is like blood. Passionate.
Yeah. Well, so he said it was closely related to emotional stability and extroversion. So I guess, yeah, You know, it's kind of like
no, passionate. I wouldn't say that's the same as passionate. Really,
I would say extroversion and passion kind of maybe go together.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So let's try the next one. Phlegmatic.
Chronic cold symptoms.
Okay, you're onto something.
Like
phlegmatic.
Poor Pippin
is kind of like related to being stable and introverted. Was kind of his thing. Like a phlegmatic person was more likely to be like kind of staid and maybe keep to themselves a little bit.
Like neutral.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. All right. What about choleric?
Eat a lot.
I don't, what I'm realizing is that we have lived in a time and in a context when cholera is just not really a thing.
Oh, they're dead.
Yeah.
Dead people.
I suppose a lot of choleric people ended up being dead, yeah. So according to Hippocrates, choleric people were unstable and extroverted. Okay, and then how about melancholic people? What do you think their deal is?
They have hair that is full of melons and also very colicky.
So we've got cholera and colic. I think you're failing this personality test, Robin.
I'm failing my Latin
exam
you're Latin right now.
I know, exactly. Your old dead white man exam. So the melancholic type is unstable and introverted.
So it's stability and extroversion are the main...
Exactly.
Okay, so there's 4 personality. Okay.
Right. So he's got like these 2 spectra, right? From one end to the other, and then it's basically like an XY plot, right?
Hippocrates. So this is a guy who said you never step in the same river twice.
Was that Hippocrates?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well that was a smart and obvious acknowledgement that he made there.
Do I get points back for dead white men?
You do, yeah. You're rising on the personality poll.
Now at 0 points.
So Hippocrates came up with this stuff. It obviously made an impact on people because it's still around. So we're going to get to like our first big personality testing methodology here, which is called the Big 5 personality traits. Now, this is like a constellation of ideas about personality testing, which has been around for hundreds of years.
Really? Okay, so I don't know anything about this.
It's basically a taxonomy for personality traits is what it is.
So there's like species and genus.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah, in a way. Now, it's been developed by a lot of various different like dead white men. Mm-hmm. And I'm not really going to go into the whole history of it because it's just not very interesting to me. But they identified these 5 factors, okay? And these were based on their observations of human nature. The first one was openness to experience, which they defined as inventive and curious versus consistent and cautious. All right. So already it's like we're going further on this line of people being on a spectrum between one thing and another thing. I suppose there's like this idea that if you identify the core spectra of human experience and then you just plot someone on a graph on each one, right? And then you can somehow aggregate that information into a profile that, makes sense to you or whatever.
You know what I love? I love that if you get on your phone right now and you look up like a beer tasting app, there's more dimensions to judge how a beer tastes than there are to categorize our personalities by a factor of like 4.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
there's
wow.
like most of these taste wheels have like anywhere from 12 to 20.
I'll bet there's a lot of overlap, right? Like sweet and bitter, right?
Well, there's a lot of like, right. You're right.
Yeah.
Because if you rate it a 1 on sweet, then it's probably going to be high on bitter. So that's kind of redundant, right? So they
wait, wouldn't it be low on bitter if it was high on sweet?
Well,
no. You said low on sweet, high on bitter,
Yep.
right? Okay, yeah.
Yep.
With you.
So, yeah, but it's maybe those could be reduced a little. But.
Well, I was just thinking about if you examine the words used, right? Like the taxonomy used, like some of it would be applicable to human personality tests and some of it wouldn't, right?
Well, some of it, like flavors are really complex, much more complex than people. Like floral.
Floral, right?
What is the opposite of that? Fecal? Like
nutty?
Nutty? I don't know. Like there's not really, it's not on a spectrum. It's just a thing.
It's something that exists on a spectrum from not there to some amount of there.
Which for personality tests, it seems like so far There's like,
there haven't
you're
been,
this
right?
thing or you're the opposite
That's
thing.
true. They're polarities is what we're really discussing, right? Which is just like, it's something interesting to note in general about how we want to create these dichotomies and we want to create polarities with opposites on either end. A lot of this stuff isn't like, is someone happy, right? How happy are they? From 0 happy to 10 happy. It's not like that. It's like you have like depressive or sad on the other end of it, right?
I just love the idea that we're more picky about food than we are people.
Well, we don't put people in our mouth most of the time.
Oh, come on. Who are you kidding?
We're very picky about the people we put in our mouths.
That is true.
Maybe not when we're children, but as we get older, we really develop a connoisseur level around it. So that first factor is openness to experience, right? The second one is conscientiousness, efficient and organized versus easygoing and careless. I definitely get marks on the conscientiousness scale, or lack thereof, I would say. I scored the lowest percentage on the conscientiousness.
Really?
With the Big 5 personality test.
Oh, good job.
Yeah, but anyway. The third one is extroversion. So that's outgoing and energetic versus solarity. I read it wrong. Solitary.
Oh, okay.
Solitary versus reserved.
Got it.
So yeah, my solarity. How much like the sun
this is
am
getting
I?
Eastern.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. The fourth one is agreeableness. Friendly and compassionate versus challenging and detached or aloof. And the fifth one, which is important to measure, is neuroticism. Sensitive and nervous versus secure and confident. And that one gets into some like attachment psychology, right?
Yeah.
Which is like a thing that's really been studied a lot recently. People talk about attachment styles.
Quick side note.
Yeah.
There's like a fifth factor that's been added into the Myers-Briggs.
Ooh,
right?
right.
So it's like
yeah.
INFP, blah, 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 whatever. You have 4, but then there's like dash, A/ or T.
Yeah.
And T is turbulent and A is assured, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
So it's like that. It's basically your confidence in yourself and your abilities. And
yeah, it seems like at some point that this concept of like how nervous you are or how confident you are got introduced. Like people identified that as an important factor, right? And it was probably coinciding with just this observation that people were making in like the second half of the 20th century, that like a fair number of people were like nervous and neurotic. And it makes me wonder whether it's like an epidemic of our time or not.
Tests. Just think about it. Like if someone just walked up to you and said, on a scale of 1 to 100, how confident are you?
Yeah.
Like, how on earth do you even begin to answer that question?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, if you are surrounded by friends and, like, people who love you.
Like,
and
doing an activity that you're the best in the room at.
Exactly, right? Then you're like, oh, I'm totally an 8.5.
Right?
You know?
Exactly.
Like, and on the other hand, if you're at a new job.
Yeah.
In a position you don't have a lot of experience in, and there's a bunch of experts in the room, and somebody asks you that question.
Totally.
You're a 3, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Yeah. And maybe you like woke up on the wrong side of bed that day.
Exactly.
Too, you know? So yeah. It's so subjective. It really is. Let's talk about the Big 5 here. Here are the criteria again. Okay. You ready? We have openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. Okay. So I'll go first. Here's how I scored.
Okay. You tell me you're on the first thing, and I'll tell you mine. And I'm going to make my score up because I didn't take this test.
Oh, you didn't take the test?
Well, this is the Big 5, right?
The Big 5.
Oh, yeah, I didn't take that.
Oh, okay. All right. So this is how I scored on the Big 5 test.
Yeah.
All right. So my openness to experience, I got 94%.
Holy shit.
Which is like, all
Dude,
right.
okay, here's the deal.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I've been struggling with, like, comfort lately, where, like, I like stick to my comfort zone a little more than is historic for me.
Yeah.
But maybe I just have totally wrong self-perception about that. But I'm going to go more toward the middle of the road for me and just say I'm around like mostly open, but like not entirely. So like 70, 75.
70%. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised. I feel like I am open to experience.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like one of those people who's like last week I did ayahuasca, and this week I'm, parasailing, and the next week I'm not like one of those kind of. But maybe that's just maybe that's a stereotypical assessment of what this really means.
In this show, Robin and Arjuna try to figure out who the hell they are.
Tune back in after an hour when they haven't figured it out, right? So, okay, my conscientiousness score, this is my lowest one in the test. I got 48%. Okay, so this is efficient, organized versus easygoing and careless.
Wait, what was the name again? Conscientious?
Conscientiousness.
I feel like I'm self-conscious. I don't know if that's the same. Like conscientious or / like concerned with doing it correctly, with doing things right is the way I think of that.
Yeah.
Right?
So how important to you is it that things get done in a particular way? I would probably say you're pretty low on that too, right? Like I've experienced you to be like fairly, as long as the sausage gets made, I'm not particularly caring about how it gets made.
Sure.
Okay, so on the extroversion test, I got 77%, which means that I am fairly outgoing and energetic versus solitary and reserved. Now this is where I really started to take issue. The first two, I was kind of like, yeah, okay, sure. That could describe me, right? But this whole concept, again, this is a thing that's really in the common vernacular right now, is whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Mm-hmm. And I've been having various conversations with friends about this, with my partner about this. She has strong ideas about where she is on that scale. And I've always struggled to relate to this a little bit because I feel both, okay? So when I am going out and hanging out with my friends, then I feel very extroverted, right? If I'm at a party, I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy meeting people. I don't really have a problem being in new situations. But the thing is, when I'm not doing that, a lot of times I just want to be left the hell alone, right? Yeah. And so, like, it's just...
Because you're over 30.
I guess so, right? I guess so. But it's one of these things where to me, it just, the usefulness of the dichotomy starts to fall away. I think you and I were talking about this, where one of our criteria for introversion versus extroversion was whether we got energy from talking to people or not, or hanging out with people. And so for me, when I feel drained, I mean, not always, but oftentimes if things have been hard, I'm stressed, whatever, my best strategy for recharging is just chilling and being alone, right? Mm-hmm. Not always. If I'm feeling depressed because I've been alone too much, then maybe I recharge by connecting with people. But I would say by and large, I get most of my juice from my alone time. So I think that's an interesting, I don't know, like what do you think about that?
It's just insane that we're trying to like categorize ourselves according to these metrics. It's just insane. The reason being, for example, let's say hypothetically you're a very likable person, Arjuna, just hypothetically speaking.
Hypothetically,
and that you have a lot of friends who care about you, hypothetically. That if you wanted to be like encouraged and supported, that you could just like put out the slightest, like most subtle cue and people would be there to back you up.
Just like affirming my identity.
Totally.
Every step
just
of the
like
way.
Whatever you need, we're there for you. Right.
Yeah.
So honestly, like that's the way I see it. It's like if you're having a bad day and you need to recharge and you have a bunch of supportive people in your life that you feel, and it's not just that you have those people, but that you're willing to ask them. Or willing to reach out to them in some way, that you would call on them to do that, right? And then on the other hand, let's say you have those people, but you move to a different city and your internet dies because it's the apocalypse, and then you don't have anyone to call on. So like you have like things you do on your own to recharge, right? Like I just think that whole idea of reaching out to people or doing a social thing to recharge versus doing something by yourself depends entirely upon your social dynamic, which again comes back to that definition we had of personality as being basically how you interact with people. Right. Which I'm not totally sold on yet, because some of this stuff is how we process and like approach things.
Yeah.
Just how we decide to approach things, whether or not people are involved.
Sure.
Right. But
you have to admit though that like There are certain people who are likely to be out partying multiple times a week versus other people who are more likely to be at home reading a book.
This show is sponsored by Megan Brandenburg Design, your brand illuminated. Does your project or business need a more cohesive visual identity? Do your marketing materials need pizzazz? Megan is your go-to. She also offers apparel design, product packaging design, and motion graphics. Megan worked with us to design the Listening Glass logo, and we love the stunning result. Megan is on Instagram at Megan Brandenburg Design. Find the full link in the episode description.
Let's get into Myers-Briggs, because that's a test that we've both done. Now, I just wanted to start with some very brief history on Myers-Briggs because I thought it was interesting.
As long as it's interesting history.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, the first thing was it was developed by a mother-daughter pair. The mother was Catherine Cook Briggs, and she began her research into personality in 1917. Apparently, it was because
Captain Cook, take him to the brig.
Her stepson had like a markedly different personality than her own daughter, and she was curious about it. So she started to like look into personality, and then she discovered the work of Carl Jung, and he had speculated that people experience the world using 4 principal psychological functions: sensation, intuition, feeling, and thinking. Jung also theorized that one of these 4 functions is dominant for each person most of the time. So that was a hot take from Carl Jung, which, by the way, he developed this impression just from his, many thousands of hours of clinical experience and anecdotal experience, blah, blah, blah. Basically, with the people that he saw. So this was, he didn't conduct like some wide study or something.
He's interesting. Carl Jung
was a very interesting fellow for sure.
Yeah.
So her daughter, Isabel Briggs Myers, joined her mother's research, and over time she kind of took it over entirely. An interesting thing about them was that neither of them was formally trained in psychology. So that's the first thing to know. In fact, Myers, she was smart. She graduated first in her class from Swarthmore College in 1919, and she wrote a mystery novel which is called Murder Yet to Come.
Please.
and she used these theories about people's types in the novel, and she won the National Detective Murder Mystery Contest that year.
I've heard of that.
I've submitted to the National Murder Mystery Contest, but they don't call me back, So basically both of them were self-taught in the field, which kind of made me feel a little skeptical. I've always felt a little skeptical around the Myers-Briggs test.
I love non-psychologists doing psychology. I love podcasts about that.
Right? Yeah. We're non-psychologists doing a podcast about we were sounding pretty professional until I told you that. But his interesting thing is that Myers actually went on to apprentice with a guy, Edward N. Hay, who was, at the time, he was a personnel manager for a large Philadelphia bank. And she went on to start one of the first successful personnel consulting firms in the US, okay?
That's a low bar.
Right, when it's the first, I guess it has to be the most successful. But kind of here's the rub for me, is that I feel like personality testing is a huge industry, okay? I think our podcast would be incomplete if we didn't discuss this. And so there's basically a lot of money in the corporate sector. In like people hire people to come up with these stupid tests.
Honestly, I think that's what this is all about.
There's a lot of money in it, right? They come up with all these tests about like you're going to be this kind of employee versus that kind of employee.
Personality tests are going to be the witchcraft of the 24th century.
The 24th century?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. It's going to take a few hundred years.
Yeah.
Kind of catch on. Yeah. But, the implications of it are actually a little chilling. Like, I actually think it's ethically dubious to ask like a prospective employee to take a test. I was recently asked by one of my clients to take a couple of these tests just to kind of get an assessment of how I was going to be to work with. But I felt a little bit like, I don't know. It felt a little bit like a transgression. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel fully cool about it.
In what manner did they ask you to do this?
Oh, it was just like, oh, so we're going to start to work together. I'd just like to get your test results.
Was it via email or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they said they just want to get a sense of who you are? Or?
Yeah, and just how it's going to be to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like...
And you were like, fuck off.
I mean, in my own way, I mean, I did it, but in my own way, I kind of felt that way because I just felt like, what are you going to decide about me? And how are you going to use that information?
So is this a person that you're expecting to have a lot of collaboration and verbal communication with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of makes sense to me, right? Because, I mean, they're trying to put you in a box 100%,
mm-hmm.
right? But they're trying to do it in order to figure out the most effective way to communicate with you.
Well, maybe.
What's the other option?
Well, maybe they read the results of the test and they're like, this person sounds too disorganized for me. Or, you know what I mean? Or this person's not... Or, I'm highly logical, so
That's really interesting. So, like, did that affect the way you took the test? Thinking about your relationship with them?
Well, it did a little bit, actually. Yeah, I was less likely to be honest about, like being tardy or being disorganized or whatever.
What test did they ask you to take?
So I took the Myers-Briggs test and the DISC test.
They asked you to take both of them?
Yes.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a question about tardiness on one of those?
I don't remember. But here's the thing.
It's like, how much do you give a shit about people you work with?
And I think the personality tests suffer from the same thing that job interviews suffer from, mm-hmm. which is that like people are only going to be as honest as they feel comfortable being honest.
Mm.
So like every job interview roughly goes something like, how dependable are you? And then whether or not you feel like you're dependable, you just try to make the best case for yourself being dependable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they ask you, questions to the effect of how good do you think you're going to be at this job?
And these tests are fucking idiotic.
Well, and that's the thing is that like regardless of what's true for you, you're going to answer the test or answer the interview in a way that you feel like gets you ahead in the situation.
Okay,
right?
Okay. This is a great segue into something we haven't talked about yet, which is...
All right, lay it on me.
When I took these tests, which was today, and I've taken the Myers-Briggs a couple of times before, but I wanted to make sure I knew what I classified as. When you Google it, there's a lot of results, right? So the question is, what is the actual test? And something I saw a lot of was Myers-Briggs based test.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Right.
So theoretically, you and I... And who knows what the hell the criteria are for having a Myers-Briggs based test. Let's say you and I start a company and we want to hire people and we want them to take a personality test. We can put whatever fucking questions we want in that test and call it a Myers-Briggs based test. Like,
well, I don't know.
How much do you hate British accents?
How tired of us are you going to be in a year?
I don't know that. I guess what I mean is that's an interesting question. What does it mean to take the official test versus something that's based on those ideas? Right?
I mean, I'm sure that you need to clear certain bars if you want to be like a Myers-Briggs based.
Are you like really?
Who knows?
Who decides that?
That's true.
And
that's
I could fire up a website tomorrow with a Myers-Briggs based test.
It's a good question. We should get Reply All on the case about that.
Yeah. Some real journalist.
Yeah, real journalist, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so now that we're talking about Myers-Briggs, let's talk about our results.
Okay. So should we do one category at a time?
Yeah, and we'll compare them.
Okay.
So Robin, why don't you tell me your letters?
Okay.
Like before we go any further.
Well, that's what I mean. I was like, okay, so I'll tell you my first letter and then you tell me your first letter.
Okay, sounds good.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Sounds great.
Okay.
And the percentage, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes, exactly. So for the first one, and this is called mind, quote unquote, this trait determines how we interact with our environment, and it's extroverted versus introverted.
Right.
I'm 75% extroverted, so E.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm E2, 61%.
Oh.
So this settles the question of which of us is more extroverted.
Okay.
Apparently you are.
Okay.
Which, that doesn't surprise me. You go out a lot, you have a lot of friends.
I go out.
You go on dates.
I do that.
Fair enough.
Energy. The trait that shows where we direct our mental energy. And this is intuitive versus observant. So I'm 73% intuitive, or I.
Okay, I am 62% intuitive.
Wow.
So far, I'm like you, but just less so.
I'm extreme.
I'm just less than you, Robin.
I'm the extremist here.
I'm like Robin, but not so Robin.
So we're both EIs so far.
Okay, we're both EIs. Oh,
okay,
that's interesting.
Third category is nature. This trait determines how we make decisions and cope with emotions. Thinking versus feeling, how we deal with emotions. So I'm 61% feeling.
Okay, so I'm also feeling, but I've got you beat here. I'm 79% feeling.
Oh!
Just all by feel, baby.
Yep, bring the feel. All right, so we're both EINF still.
EIF.
EIF, yes, thank you. Yes. Okay, EIF. Damn, we're like 75% the same so far. I mean, at least in terms of category.
Yeah.
Like what side of the split we land on. So just to contrast it, we could be I-O. Really? Do they call it O? The observant? I've never heard that. I-O. Like, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Everyone is like,
I don't know what the letters they
intuitive.
Give you are if you...
No.
I guess because the N is intuitive, yeah.
So wait, what's observant then?
I don't know. Because I didn't get that result on my test.
Yeah, I mean, okay, whatever. So the fourth one is tactics. This trait reflects our approach to work, planning, and decision making. You can be judging or prospecting. And I am 74% prospecting.
You're 74% prospecting. All right, I am also prospecting. I'm 63%.
Okay.
Prospecting.
Yeah. So I'm more extreme on this one again. Okay. But still the same.
The same.
Same letter. So we're both INFPs.
ENFPs.
ENFPs,
right?
thank you.
Yep.
And then sometimes I tack on this fifth one.
Additional, how neurotic.
It's like a dash.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Did you get a score for this one?
I did. I was T. I was turbulent.
Oh, God. We're the same person.
We're the same. Oh, my God. We got the same thing.
Oh, no.
And we both have the same name, which is kind of hilarious.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. We really are the same person. You know what? I'll bet that my Myers-Briggs result is closer to yours than your own twin brother's is.
Ooh. How much do you want to wager on that?
I'll wager $5.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Okay.
Coming in the next show.
We'll find out. So what was your turbulence score?
58% turbulent.
Okay, see, I'm 75% turbulent.
Yeah. And that's turbulent versus assertive. So this is basically the confidence measure on this test. It's called identity. It says this trait underpins all others, showing how confident we are in our abilities and decisions. What's really interesting is 58 versus 42. If that were an election, it would feel like a landslide. But when you're talking about personality traits, it's like,
It's just...
It's like a little bit more.
Yeah, you're just on a spectrum, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But either way, you end up with a letter or not. Right? You either end with one letter or the other letter. It could be 5149. Yeah. And there you are, like in a category.
Totally.
So there should be like a 5% middle ground, like 45 to 55% that's just like neutral.
So what do we learn about this? This website, it was 16personalities.com that we took this one on. It told me that I am a diplomat. It says that my role is a diplomat. And it said that my strategy is social engagement.
Really?
Which I'm guessing is what you got too, because we
Were you a campaigner?
Was I a campaigner?
Because like,
yes, I am. Yep. They called me a campaigner.
Yeah, we're
exactly.
The same. Okay.
Yeah. So whatever that
16
means.
16 categories we could have fallen into.
Yeah. We both ended up in the same one.
Yeah.
So here's one of the things that I was annoyed by with the Myers-Briggs test is that it asked me the same kinds of questions over and over again, and it just phrased them slightly differently.
Right.
And sometimes it would ask you a question positively, and then it would ask you a question negatively.
I love that the subtext to that whole strategy is like, oh, the first time we ask them this question, like they might try to pull some hijinks and trick us.
Yeah,
but we're going to ask them it again, but we're going to flip two of the words around.
Right, exactly. And it's just so, that was one of the things that I started objecting to in taking these tests, was that I could start to peer into the methodology of how the test was designed. Yeah. And I just was so over it, you know, I was just like, man, fuck your test. And I think that that's one of the weaknesses of these personality tests is like, if you're taking a test and especially a test which is designed to analyze you, right? And if you figure out what the analysis is and you figure out how to game the test, then in my opinion, the test has failed.
Right.
And so we were talking about this, about how these tests need to have some kind of internal measure of how successful they're being with you, right? In my opinion, I think that the Myers-Briggs test, certainly the 16 personalities version, I think it failed me because in the middle of the test, I started to figure out what they were testing, and I didn't want to be tested that way.
It should be a lot more subtle. Like, what was your favorite Power Ranger?
Such a great question.
Yep.
I think, it should be like 20 questions. I think the personality test should be that they should just assemble a bunch of your friends.
You know what? We could create our own Myers-Briggs based personality test and ask the right questions.
We should. It'll be, which Backstreet Boy are you? What was your favorite Power Ranger? You know what, dude? Paps or Corona.
No kidding.
Right?
I know a guy in town who like designs these like clickbaity personality tests that go on social media sites, and it's like all that kind of stuff.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, that probably says more about me than, the Myers-Briggs does.
We don't have psychology degrees, which I think makes us qualified to write personality test.
We're right in the correct bracket. Okay, so let's talk about this DISC test finally, because this is another big thing that's been around for a while. This was the one that I was least impressed with, to be honest.
All right, so backing up, like DISC is like a very work-oriented test, right? It's like you want to be able to figure out who on your team in the workplace, what their personalities and like collaboration styles are, basically, right?
And that is because, the person who originally was kicking around the idea was a psychologist named William Moulton Marston, okay?
Say that again?
So there was a psychologist named William Moulton Marston, 3 names, and he kind of identified these different traits, 4 of them: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness, which DISC, when you put them together, they make the term DISC. And he made, this like round thing that looks like a disc. You can tell already about William Moulton Marston what he thought was clever. But what you're picking up on here, Robin, is that
I'm picking up on something.
In 1956, a guy named Walter Clark, who is actually an industrial psychologist, he constructed an assessment.
See, that sounds like a real job. Yeah.
Well, he was basically like these other people, but he worked in industry instead of just as a lone wolf, right? So
I just imagine there's like some logger in like a mill in town who's just like the old wise dude with like a gray goatee who's like calls himself the industrial psychologist. But anyway,
he's like that guy. He's gonna break under pressure, man. When it comes time to chop that tree, he's gonna balk. So anyway, he created what he called the activity vector analysis, which is a checklist of adjectives on which he asked people to indicate descriptions that were accurate about themselves. So basically what this guy did was, he was an industrial psychologist. He was literally creating these personality tests to fit worker bees into classifications and basically to put them in bubbles, right? So again, we're kind of getting into this, like the meeting of like capitalism and personality testing.
Yeah. Too bad the online test, they don't allow write-in answers. It's like all of them, it's just like alpha male, alpha male, alpha male, alpha male.
Put one sensitive in there just to like balance it out a little bit, just to make it look like you're not totally gaming the test, right?
Sensitive emo dude. Alpha male.
So basically the DISC assessment was just designed to sort worker bees into their various parts of the hive. So let's go into what we scored on the DISC assessment.
Okay.
So apparently I have a blend of both supportive and cautious traits.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, we scored the opposite on this test.
Okay, so what did you come out
I love that happened because it just shows how shitty these tests are.
Right, I know. Well, like exactly the same on the Myers-Briggs and exactly opposite on the DISC test. Right?
I love it.
Okay,
so I was a DI.
Wow, so I was an SC and you were a DI. Yeah, that's about as opposite as it can get.
So DI is like directive. It's like I think it's dominant.
Dominant.
Like I don't think of myself as a dominant person, but I found the test to be really weird.
Yeah.
For example, the questions, the way that they're composed is often it's like, are you both A and B?
Oh, that's right.
Are you C and D?
That's right. And you would look at them and you'd be like, well, I'm kind of this, but I'm not quite
it's
that.
It's really hard. Just an example. Like this is the first question. It is, in my work environment, it is most important to me, ellipses, A, to help coworkers be in a peaceful environment, B, to feel that my coworkers admire me and to be free from rigid rules, okay, C, to know exactly what is expected of me and to finish one task before moving to another, D, to get things done and to see results. So all of those were blank and blank, and you might have identified with the first half of A and the second half of C.
Yeah,
but you can't do that.
No.
It's like you kind of have to eat the whole package, as it were.
It's obnoxious.
Yeah.
I don't know. I agree. I found the methodology to be kind of bizarre and frustrating.
One of the options on one of the questions was, I'll do it if it makes others think more highly of me. And it's just like, who with any amount of self-respect is going to put that down on a standardized test?
Right? Exactly. It's kind of like...
Even though it might be true, like, who would mark it?
It's kind of like taking a test to work at a bank and having one of the questions be, would you rob this bank? Right?
Are you a total sucker? Or like...
It's like, who's going to answer honestly to that question? You know what it reminds me of? Actually, this happened when I was applying for my US citizenship. There's a question on the citizenship test, which is something along the lines of like, would you or have you ever plotted the overthrow of the United States government, right? Now, like, what person who wants to pass...
It's like, wait, this is a trick question. Yeah. A true American is a revolutionary and would have thought of it.
Right, but would have ultimately decided, whatever. So, but it's like, who's going to say yes? I don't know. Is this like a very basic intelligence test? I don't know. Like, who in their right mind is going to say yes to that question?
Oh my God. We should do the next show on that test, man.
Oh, we should. Oh, that test was a doozy, my friend. It really was a doozy. So yeah, in conclusion, I think we both found the DISC test to be highly suspect. And I'm not even really sure, like, what do I get out of it? So some words that describe me based on the DISC test are helpful, kind, logical, and methodical. Mm-hmm. Which is like, okay, I am all of those things in some ways. Mm-hmm. I don't know that necessarily is like, those are the governing principles by which I do my work, though. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go that far.
Right. I think both of these tests tended to frame whatever category you ended up in as being like really positive things.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Like I ended up scoring more on the like intuitive, emotional side on the Myers-Briggs than I thought. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I think of my values as being like a little bit more toward being calculating and like thoughtful, like really like hard thinking, right?
Yeah.
And yet it definitely framed the results in this like really kind of weird like mystical way where it was like, oh yeah, like you're not a super hard thinker, but like you are like super in tune with all the crazy energies. Like it was like not quite that extreme, but it was something like along those lines. And I was just like, this isn't making me feel very confident. When it gave you your score, like your result on the DISC test, do you remember the sentence that it said, like when it told you what you were? Because I screenshotted mine, and it said, Robin, comma, your at work DISC style is D/I, period. That's fantastic, exclamation point. And I just found that to be, it's like my confidence in the scientific nature of this test was just totally undermined by this like really,
it's just like
affirming statement. Like,
go get him, Robin.
I'm just wondering if they have different phrases for like each type, where it's like,
that's like supposed to make that
since you're an
personality
SC,
type
maybe it's
feel
like
good.
you're amazing instead of that's fantastic. You know, I don't know.
So, Robin, what's your takeaway here after us having done these personality tests and talked about them?
I think they're really ambitious test.
Yeah.
Overly so. They're trying to categorize our personalities overall, which in reality, we have different personalities in different context, right? Mm-hmm. So just like off the top of my head, there's a professional context and there's a certain way there's certain values I have in that context, which aren't the same values I have when I'm in a social context. When I'm in a romantic or intimate context, I have different values. When I'm by myself, I have different values and ways of interacting with myself, right? And of thinking. Mm-hmm. So how do we encapsulate all of that into a single test? One of the questions on the Myers-Briggs was, or at least the Myers-Briggs based test, because it wasn't the official one, was when looking for a movie to watch, you can spend ages browsing the catalog. And I have yet to meet someone who doesn't do this, but maybe like I'm surprised it didn't say Netflix. Like
That's true. Like, who goes into Netflix and they're just like, ooh, yeah.
Like to me, that just says low standards. Like, that doesn't have anything to do, like...
Well, maybe that is a personality type. You're a low standards, basic consumer, Robin. Yep. Okay, you know what this made me realize? There are 2 personality tests so far which have had some merit for me. The first one was the love language test.
Okay, yeah.
That one has been pretty right on for me. Made a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Definitely my top love language is like physical affection.
Too.
There you go. There you go. And surprisingly, my second one, I thought it would be words of affirmation, but it's actually not.
What is it?
It's like a quality time.
That's my second one too.
All right. Put it right here. Yeah, see?
That's hilarious.
So maybe we are more similar than we thought.
And you know, maybe there's more to a name than we thought.
Could be, you know? But that was one where I don't know why. So maybe there are people out there who are just like, this test is garbage. Mm-hmm. It didn't take into account all of these other things that are part of my love language, you know? But for me, when I took that, I was like, okay, this really, it was very clear to me why I valued what I valued. And taking that test really did help me to get clear about like, I'm not feeling good in this romantic relationship. Why is that? Right. And it's also been helpful, like with my partner, her love languages are a little bit different than mine. And it's really helpful for me to remember that because maybe I go out of my way a little bit to like give her more verbal affirmation because that's her top one. Mm-hmm. So words are really important. So it's really important for me to just be like, I love you, sweetie. I'm committed to you. Mm-hmm. This relationship's great. You know, then she like sleeps at night and she's like, this is awesome. This is working for him, right? So I really liked that one a lot.
I'm 100% with you. Yeah. I love that test because it's focused on a particular aspect of our lives and trying to figure out how we are in all arenas.
That's true.
I was talking to a friend today about the big 5. She brought it up.
Yeah.
And she mentioned that one of the 5 qualities was eroticism.
Oh, interesting.
But I had misheard her. It was actually neuroticism. And I was temporarily like really excited. That's awesome that this test is focusing on this really specific arena of our lives. That's really important to most people. Mm-hmm. And that it's trying to like figure that part out as well as these other parts, right? Because I think figuring out how we are in all these different arenas is just, it's too hard for one test to do. It's silly.
I agree.
And so that really excited me, this idea of like figuring out love languages is even more broad than eroticism, because eroticism is like your sexual style, right? Yeah. It's like, what are you into in the bedroom and what's your style and blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was really a cool thing to think about. And I kind of wonder if there's a test out there now for that.
Like an erotic style test? Yeah, that would be interesting.
But love languages is like a good stepping stone to that. You know, it kind of figures out the broader picture of how you work in romantic relationships and what you're, in terms of your interaction with your partner and what's important to you.
Yeah. The other one, now you're probably just going to shake your head at this. And I'm not hanging my hat on this or anything, but I have found a surprising amount of validity to astrology.
All right.
Yeah. Now, it's one of those things where I'm not one of these people who like every time I meet someone, I need to ask them their birthday and I'm, calculating and blah, 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 blah. But I have really noticed that I identify very strongly with my sun sign, which is Libra. Mm-hmm. And also when I've calculated out my planets, I identify very strongly with those as well.
Can't believe I'm doing a podcast with a heathen.
I know, right? Just throw it all out. So again, I'm not saying astrology is here or there. Like for example, I actually had a potential employer do an astrology reading for me, and they didn't hire me. So it makes me wonder if I didn't pass the test, right? So I wouldn't do anything like that. But I've just kind of anecdotally, for my own interest, I track it sometimes. And yeah, I've found some amount of correlation there.
Mm-hmm. I had someone do a chart for me. Mm-hmm. And until then, I was really skeptical of it. And then she sent me a chart that she did herself, and I was really impressed, actually.
Yeah,
with how accurate it was, and it like made me introspect a little bit. But I can't really go into any more depth than that because it's been a long time since that happened. Sure. That was one of the things that made me suggest this show topic, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so here's the thing. Like, I've heard people say this before, where they'll be like, yeah, well, astrology, of course it works on everyone because it's all phrased in a way, it's like it's all ego reinforcing. And so...
Well, all of these tests are.
They are, right? Yeah. And so that's the thing. And so people argue that they're kind of designed inherently to make you believe them, mm-hmm. right? Because a lot of it's phrased positively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I have to say, like reading the results of the Myers-Briggs or the DISC assessment or, the 5 personalities one, I didn't really have that feeling of like, oh, this test gets me, mm-hmm. right? Whereas like with astrology, I kind of did. You know what I mean? I was mm-hmm. like, wow, this really feels resonant. And when I read mm-hmm. the other astrological descriptions of signs that aren't mine, they just don't click as much, right?
Yeah.
So like... Who knows what's there? But right. I thought that was interesting to contrast because mm-hmm. I kind of want to throw that argument out the window. The whole idea that like you only believe astrology because it's phrased in a certain way to make you want to believe it.
Yeah. Well, I tested that a little bit with the Myers-Briggs mm-hmm. because the test I took, we both took, was you fall into one of 16 categories plus the fifth thing, which actually makes it 32 if you're T or A. But I went and browsed the other ones just to see if I outright just identified with any of the others. And many of them were like borderline, right? It's like, oh yeah, I could totally kind of see myself doing
that one as well. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
But when they're all positively phrased, like we don't have any categories that are like, you're lazy and worthless. Like,
yeah. I like the asshole category, right?
Right? Yeah. You're like, where's that category? Like...
We all know it exists.
So aside from everything being phrased positively, there's also not a way to sabotage the test, which I feel like there should be.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have 4 axes in the Myers-Briggs, and you're either, toward one end or the other on all of those axes. And so let's say there's 8 questions that ask whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, right? You could answer 4 of those questions extroverted and 4 of them introverted, and you're going to end up in the middle. Mm-hmm. But there's several different ways that you could answer 50-50. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to account for the nuance of which half of those questions you answer extroverted versus introverted.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's also no way to... You could be totally contradictory. Let's say that they ask the same question, but with different phrasings. And if you answer them differently, it'll just be like, okay. You're like in the middle. But it really means that you just don't know yourself. Like, or you just aren't consistent in how you perceive and describe yourself.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that these tests should be breakable. There should be results that are invalid.
Right. Or the test says, look, you disagreed with yourself. What's up?
Yeah.
What's going on there?
Yep.
Right. Instead of just kind of averaging it out, right?
Yep. It should be like, yo, you got work to do. It should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because honestly, I'd probably fall in that category.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that, exactly. I feel like any test that's too easy to game, right? Or any test which doesn't account for the way in which someone's answering the questions, it's failing for me. And so, I think I would be a lot more compelled to take a test that I felt had really nailed that. Or like, for example, those OkCupid tests? Like you answer 100 questions on your profile or whatever. I think that those are somewhat interesting
100?
because...
Come on. Like 400.
Well,
You're a slacker.
That's as far as I got. I know, man. Exactly. But what I liked about those was that I just got to see my reaction to very specific scenarios, right? And that taught me a lot. You know, I was like, how likely am I to have sex on the first date? Right?
On the dating app. Right? Like versus let's say it's a professional survey. Like right. your next job interview is like, well, we're going to have you fill out this OkCupid survey.
Right. That'd be hilarious. Which kind of brings me to the fact that I think I learned a lot more about myself taking these tests than anyone else learned about me. And so that's kind of my takeaway, is that I think if you sit down at one of these tests and you watch yourself taking it and you really use that as a basis for trying to figure out how you actually are, I think that's kind of interesting. It's kind of useful,
I want to add that listeners should take our takeaway with a grain of salt, because we scored very similarly on the test.
Yeah,
there true. Might be reason to believe that we're similar personalities if these tests are valid. And that, as we pointed out at the beginning of the show, we have an aversion to being put in boxes and categorized, and that we have kind of a natural rebellion to this kind of stuff. Yeah. Maybe there's more validity than we think, but I think we're both a little bit skeptical about the takeaway of both the Myers-Briggs and the DISC test.
Definitely.
But we're both the same person, it turns out. So,
so maybe
gotta get more samples.
Well, anyway, I would be interested. Any of you guys who have thoughts about this or take any of these tests, let us know.
I would love to hear.
Send an email, join us in our Discord server. This is one topic in particular where I would really love to hear from our listeners and just get some other hot takes.
Definitely. This got a lot more personal too. And I let some hot takes out there that maybe I'll regret when I.
Well, if you object to Robin's logorrhea,
I would love to hear about it.
You can write about that
too. Tell me how I'm wrong.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Listening Glass. If you've enjoyed this show, we'd love it if you'd share it with your friends and on social media. Your word of mouth means a lot to us and is a way you can help our humble podcast grow. Find us on our Twitter handle @ListeningGlass. You can leave feedback there or by emailing us at listeningglasscast@gmail.com. Join the ongoing discussion in our community by joining our Discord server, linked in our episode description. This episode features the track Vis Insita by Mac Woodruff, the track Dr. Beauchef, Penguin Dentist by Kneebody, and also the track Lipton Service Boy by Eero Johannes. We're incredibly grateful to these artists for letting us feature their work. Find more information about them in the episode description.